you can't control whether people, think it's good or not. You can only control if it exists, if you put it out there and let people decide for themselves, because there is an audience for everybody and for everything, and it might just change someone's life.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Beautiful Work Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Krikorian. Each episode we feature a special guest from all walks of life, and we ask them to explore the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the trials, and the triumphs in their chosen field. Writers, musicians, coaches, business owners, athletes, and everything in between, we peel back the curtain to hear their stories, to walk their paths, to find out how they breathe life into their beautiful work. Welcome to this edition of the Beautiful Work Podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We have a great show today with Erik Przytulski, who is a writer, composer, producer, all-around fantastic musician and writer and person that people really like to work with. And he's got a lot going on right now for him that we're excited to share his story and what he's been doing. Before we do, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this edition. If you're interested in hearing the past 10 episodes that have come out starting in October, you can head over to the website, dankrikorian.com, dankrikorian.com, or beautifulworkpodcast.com. We'll take you there as well. You can see all the past shows, read the show notes, click on the links to the various people and what they're doing. And I hope you do. And while you're there, I hope you think about joining the newsletter. It comes out about once, maybe twice a month with updated information on the podcast, as well as my music and anything else that's going on. Speaking of music, we are coming up on just a couple of weeks away from the release of my fifth record, Grandeur, be out on Friday, January 18th, and I am just really excited about that. We've been working on it for over 4 years, and there's been a ton of great people that have been involved. And speaking of a ton of great people involved, the month of January and into February, I've gotten a chance to sit down with many of the folks who were heavily involved with the making of the record Grandeur, and getting a chance to dive into what they do, their lives, their history, and bringing their stories to light. And it's been a ton of fun getting to do that, and I can't wait to, with the release of the album, also release their stories at the same time. And I'm hoping it'll be kind of a cool dual release where the record will come out and it'll stand on its own, but also the people that were involved in it will get a chance to hear what they do and how they do it. And there's been so many people that are involved. Couldn't get everybody, but got quite a few. And man, just really excited for January with all that it holds. So look out for that. As always, as well, if you can and are enjoying the podcast, please think about leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. And we do have a Patreon page where you can donate to the podcast, patreon.com/Dan Krikorian, and anything would help, and you get some free extra stuff if you do. Okay, that's it for this week. So without further ado, let's get to the show. Erik Przytulski is a songwriter, musician, and musical theater composer and producer, currently residing in Costa Mesa, California. A Berklee College of Music grad, Erik set out over 20 years ago to begin making a life in music. His early days after college in New Jersey found Erik playing and teaching music every way possible, from bar gigs late at night to taking on piano students early in the morning. Erik did it all. After moving back to California, Erik continued to play anywhere and everywhere, and eventually joined the Grammy-nominated and very popular reggae band Common Kings. After 9 years with Common Kings, Erik found a new calling within the musical landscape, and he began helping compose and write for musical theater. Erik's reputation within the musical theater business continued to grow as he produced his original works such as A Song for Christmas, Class of '90, Christmas in Netherland, Princesses, and more, and worked with writers and performers such as Jane Lynch, Laurie Metcalf, and Andrew Lippa. Erik is currently preparing for his highly acclaimed and award-nominated production Alien vs. Musical in its off-Broadway debut in New York City, January 14th, 18th, and 20th. Madeline Ronstein and Theater Skip at LA wrote of it, "It'll leave you in stitches from laughing so hard and help you rediscover your love of musicals." And Stephen Stanley in Stage Scene LA wrote, "Alien vs. Musical is that rarity, a show with equal appeal to Broadway lovers and to those who never cared to see a musical in their lives." Erik is here today to talk about a life in music, how a career can change directions, and his new love of the Food Network. Okay, I am joined this morning by Erik Przytulski. Erik, I think I got that pronunciation correctly.
Awesome.
Well, Erik, thanks so much for joining the podcast this morning. And how's your holiday season been as we're recording this so far?
It's so far been great. I mean, busy as usual for, working musicians. It's that time of year, you know how it is. And so, our Christmas starts at around like 12:30 in the afternoon, usually for me.
Okay.
But it started back in like September. So,
oh, wow.
So, yeah, depending on the year, usually is a lot of, preparation for, the holidays for music or shows, or depending on what you're working on. But, yeah. And then the day of with the family and everything was pretty fantastic. Presents just flying open. Yeah. There's more kids now,
Always makes it fun with the kids around. They kind of bring a level of excitement to the holidays.
Very much.
Yes. Well, good. Well, really glad to have you with us. And you've just done so much with your career. We're going to get into a lot about, writing and composing, producing, all of that. But before we get into that, do you have anything maybe outside of all of your day-to-day stuff that you do with music and theater, that a hobby or something that maybe a lot of people don't know about that you like to do?
I guess it's so funny. A few years back, I started watching Food Network.
Okay.
My family does. My parents, and when we'd get together with the family about once a month, we'd get together at someone's house, and they'd always be playing Food Network in the background, either at my brother's place or at my parents'. And I'm like, this is so funny. It's just a show about food. And I don't know, long story short, I just got hooked. And I've got a pretty limited palate. I don't eat like lots of crazy things, but the things I do I really like chocolate and like baking, chocolate cake, chocolate cookies, things like that. And then I thought, wow, what if I tried making this, and I'm a very picky eater, so I want things like a certain way. So I've been cooking a lot and started baking, and now expanded into even some cooking. Like I wanted to make like the perfect French fry.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
the perfect like fish and chips. And so that's kind of a thing. And people are starting to get it. On Christmas Eve, I did 4 church services playing piano at a church in Orange County, and we have to do 4 in a row, and there's no time to get food. We usually had a break. There used to be like a 2-hour break, and we'd go somewhere like to
Right.
just a restaurant, whatever's open on Christmas Eve. So instead, I make all this food and make this whole spread, and it's simple stuff, but but I make it all home, and that's kind of fun. I've never really thought of myself as a cook. I would never go that
Uh-huh.
far, but it's definitely it's kind of like putting like music together or producing.
Yeah.
It's like following the directions and going by your taste, and if and listening to your your palate and your the flavors, and doing what you like, and so it's been interesting. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
That's fun. And I was gonna say, yeah, you being a musician and doing all that, it is cooking and baking seems similar, where you kind of, you said you have a framework, and then you can kind of add your own to it as well, be creative with it. My wife, Allie, is a fantastic cook, and she just does all sorts of stuff. But she's gotten me into watching the Food Network. They have the holiday baking championships.
Yes.
And boy, we've watched a lot of those, and I really get into them. That's really fun.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So let's get into your career a little bit, and I guess I'll leave it to you maybe to describe, what your job would be, or what you consider, what you do for work, for those that don't really know what goes into your career. How would you describe it?
Well, it's when I finally did make music kind of like my full-time, like career. This was a while back, maybe about 20 years ago. It's interesting. It's like starting your own business. I was lucky that I kind of figured that out quickly. I don't know how far to go back, or if you want to go from the beginning. I mean, currently right now, I'm focusing on writing and I'm producing for musicals, musical theater that I'm writing. And then I have some work I do on the side, like play at different churches and schools. And I also music direct musicals at different schools nearby. And then I take whatever, work is around, here and there, kind of day to day. But then my main time is just writing and producing and trying to get shows that I've written up. But before that, right out of college, I just had a day job. I worked at a computer sales and technical support company, and during the day, and then I would just play in bands at night, cover bands, original bands, just whatever I could get, moving from band to band. And that was a tough road. And then one day I decided, you know what, I'm just going to just do this full time. I'm going to just make music my life. And actually it was Christmas exactly 20 years ago Christmas 21 years ago, 97, the Christmas, right before 98. And 98, I quit my job. I quit everything. And I said, I'm just going to do music full time.
Wow.
I had no idea what I was going to do. And I had a lot of friends who were kind of doing it as well. And so they threw some piano students at me. So I started teaching piano. I had no background in doing that, but I'm like, I could teach kids how to, scales and things like that. And I had a friend of mine who had a sound company and would do PA work and sound work for all the bands. And I was living in New Jersey at the time.
Okay.
And there's a lot of bands up and down the shore there. And he taught me how to do some sounds. Like, here's how a soundboard works. Here's how mics get plugged in. And so I ran sound for like afternoon, bands like duos and trios during the summers. And I worked for a sound company doing tech. And then I played in just as many other bands and cocktail hour things just by myself, just doing whatever I could. And then
Sure.
once I moved, and then moving out here to California, I kind of kept that going and just added more and more. And, it's just, you just do as much work as you can. And I think people maybe not realize how much music is out there in the world. You're listening to it in stores or in the radio or just wherever you go, there's music. And if you're allow yourself to, the opportunity to try new things, even if it's, just outside of your house a little bit, but it's still within music, there's a lot of work out there. So, but you just have to kind of hustle for it. But once you kind of get in, people will start referring you and calling you. And so that was, kind of how I made it up until I had to finally focus in on one thing.
Sure. Man, you hit on a couple of things for me that hit home. I mean, so, my full-time living is not music, but it's a large, part of what I still do. And 6 or 7 years ago, when I was doing it more full-time and touring all the time, I just remember kind of the freedom that you feel when you decide you're going to try to do it, but also the fear of just, wow, I got to find ways to make money and play this show and that show and, kind of do whatever. And can you describe when you first decide to do it, what that's like as a young musician starting out?
Yeah. It's so funny, as you just said that, it just totally brought back the memory that I felt, when it first happened. So going back, I always knew I wanted to do music full time, and I couldn't really get going. I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, and then I moved to New Jersey straight after that because a girl I was dating at the time had moved there, and so we're like, hey,
Sure.
let's do that, and we broke up pretty soon afterwards. But I was still out in New Jersey. I'm like, this is near New York. I want to just do something, but I was still in this day job. And then I flew home to San Diego, 97. This is where my family lives. And I decided to throw this like impromptu, like Christmas show together, just like, with me. And I had my brother who plays sax and a couple friends of mine who sing and a couple other people. And I just put this little thing together at this coffee shop. And this was before the internet. So you couldn't really, well, not before the internet, but it's before social media.
Right.
But we sent emails out to people and put a couple flyers out and just kind of spread the word. And before I knew it, there was like 40 some people there that I hadn't seen since like high school, and it was great. And we did this show, and it felt so good. I'm like, I want this feeling all the time. How do I do this? But
yeah,
I love that feeling. I'm like, I don't want to do anything else. I went back to Jersey, and I went to my job. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to bring this company down or I'm going to get fired because my heart's just not in it. So I eventually left, and I worked with some great people over there too. It was really kind of sad, but I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, this was a steady job. This was, income and, paying my rent and everything. And the interesting thing that happened, this happened like within like a few months after I made the decision. And then I started teaching piano. I had like 4 students, just a couple that my friends who also were piano teachers just kind of threw at me. And I started doing that PA work I mentioned before. And then a friend of mine referred me to a band that was trying to get up and doing weddings. And then within less than a year, like 6 to 8 months, I was working like 12-hour days.
Wow.
Like I would we'd start like, I would be starting teaching anywhere between 2-3 in the afternoon till about 7 or 8. And then I would go to rehearsals or I'd be doing gigs. And if you gig and, you're playing up until like 2 a.m. until you get home 3 or 4 a.m. and then it just starts over. And I would be working almost 7 days a week. And I was making more money doing this job that I was just had no idea. One of my piano students, I had like from 4 to like 7 to 10 to like 30 eventually. And I never advertised. It just sort of blew up, but I loved it, and I kept doing it, and I made it work. And then within, less than a year later, I was making twice as much as I did at my steady day job because I was working and hustling, and I was loving what I did. And again, that feeling of like having no security, like, oh, well, you don't have health,
right.
Where's your insurance and where's your, all this stuff. It's like, well, you know what? I went out and I found insurance, and I got that, and I took care of all these other things that most people get, with their regular job. I'm like, this is still way better. And I have more security because I'm in control of what I'm doing, for the first time. I thought at first I was going to have no control when I made this crazy, just like leap of faith of like, and it was, I think the other feeling is that after that show I mentioned, that little Christmas show, which was just in this little coffee shop, I knew that I couldn't go back to what I was doing before. I couldn't, just go back to that job. I can't work. I can't do anything else. This is all I want to do. And if I don't make this work, then I'm just I don't know. There's nothing else, So, but I don't know. It just felt, that fear went away really quickly, and it was very freeing. And then, so my day to day back then was just teaching during the afternoons, and then like during the summer when teaching would go down, I started doing the PA work at different clubs on the shore in Jersey, and I just mixed bands, and I met a lot of musicians, so I got to play with them on gigs, and met one of my really close friends out there who I'm still in touch with and I still hang out with when I go out to visit out there. And also an amazing musician. His name is Jay. And he was a DJ. So I got to meet like the DJ community. It was just amazing how once you put yourself into that mode and that world, all these doors just flew open.
And you touched on so many great things in there. And I think maybe it's not so much anymore, but sometimes think people, when you hear someone, oh yeah, I'm doing music full time or something. And there's kind of like this stigma of the guy that just sits around all day on the couch and then, goes to the bar and plays at night and kind of lazy musician. And, the ones that I've been around and people like yourself, man, it's quite the opposite, where they are hustling and playing and meeting people and networking, at least the ones that end up making it a reality for them to do it full time. And so, your personality and how you work, you have to be that way to make it.
No, it's I work harder, I think, once I did music than I did with any other job. Not that you don't work hard in any job, but I think when you love something and if you treat it like, hey, this is your life, this is your career, your business. Yeah, it's like any other job that you do.
Right. And one of the bands we talked a little before the show that you were in for a little while, people might recognize the name Common Kings. You were in for
Common Kings, yeah. Yeah. I love those boys. I love those guys. I miss them too. I was in there with them for 9 years. We were under a different name called Not Too Soul when we were kind of up and coming. And then around 2010, I think, or 2011, I changed the name to Common Kings. And if you're a Common Kings fan, you know that they just were... their last album was nominated for a Grammy last year. And that's a huge, I'm so proud of those guys. Yeah. I left around in 2012 is when I left the band to pursue musical theater full time. And that was a very tough decision because I really loved playing with them. But I just, a lot of changes, with me and what I wanted to do and focus on. But they're a great group. Yeah, definitely. If you haven't heard them, check them out. Reggae and pop and kind of a mix of rock a little bit in there. Yeah. And R&B. They're awesome.
Yeah. I remember seeing you guys from time to time a while back, like Orange County Fair or places around. And because I went to church with one of the members and I remember watching you guys and just the musicianship in that band was very, very high. Great players all over the band.
Yeah.
So let's kind of shift, and you touched on leaving Common Kings and playing with them around, you said 2011, 12, and
around that time.
What was it about you when you're going back through all of your stuff 20 years ago and playing here and there in bands, but what was it about musical theater specifically that you knew that was where you wanted to spend the bulk of your time?
Well, I got to tell you, if someone told me this years ago, like through high school, college, and even in the years I was hustling and playing in bands, if this is where I was going to end up, I would have just laughed. I'm like, you're kidding me? No way. I know nothing about musical theater. Not interested. It's the funniest thing. I don't know how I got here, but I'm here and I love it. I mean, this was again, is a very weird, path I took to get here, especially since I did live out and for about 5 years in New Jersey, just a stone's throw from the heart of musical theater and everything. Had I known then, but I know now. So when I moved back to California, back in 2000, like mid 2000, and I just knew I wanted to just get back into, just get back to California and go to LA and start, doing more songwriting. I love being in New Jersey and playing in different bands. But I really wanted to be a songwriter. In Berklee College of Music, they actually have a a major songwriting, and that's what I majored in with some arranging. And I really wanted to get into a band and or start a band or produce like artists and just write. And it was interesting over the time that I would write. I was just having a real hard time kind of just finding my voice, and I couldn't figure out why. Joining the band when I was with Common Kings in the early years, it was great because I kind of helped really take the music that they wrote and it's almost like a song doctor, kind of help them find the craft. That's one thing that I was really good at with the craft and studying and learning, and that's how we were able to really build our music. And as I'm just doing my everyday thing of teaching and schoolwork and playing with that band and and just all my everyday thing, I wasn't sure. I got this one job. One of my piano students, his dad, his and her, actually I had two, their brother and sister. I was teaching them, and their dad had this idea. He had this musical that he was kicking around, and he's like, "Hey, can you help me write this?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know anything about musicals, but I needed work," and he was willing to, just pay me for my time. And so I helped him. Well, and long story short, with that side of the story, that 2005 we premiered a musical in Huntington Beach at Playhouse. It was called The Golden Dream. The writer, his name is Joe Syack. He's a really good guy. And I wrote the music for him and helped him with lyrics, and we put this whole show together. And it was a whole surreal experience. And after doing that, it was a big hit. We did like 3 weeks, and it was a great musical. And I mean, the experience it really opened me up to the world of musicals. I'm really big proponent of studying, so I studied a lot about musicals and musical writing, and I'm like, oh, this is so different. I never really saw this. And as I started doing more musical theater work, because after that day when they saw that I also music directed, I started getting all this work doing music directing for community theater shows and everything, and I started getting more involved in the musical theater world. I'm like, everything's kind of changed. Shows like Wicked and Avenue Q were out, and much more pop, kind of centric music. And all of a sudden I realized the music that I've been writing, all my songs, my style, my voice, I guess I've been searching for, really fit hand in glove to musical theater. I tend to be more of a story writer, or I'm not a songwriter that feels like I need to be inspired by like, oh, look at that beautiful sunset, I got to write a song. I feel like I need a prompt, or and I've always felt that way. And I never knew that until I started doing musicals. I'm like, everything here is very dramatized. I'm a big movie buff, and I'm big, and television, a lot of things. And I've always, in another life, I always thought, oh, I would have loved to be like a director or something. And all these sort of things in my mind all sort of came together. I'm like, this might be it. But it didn't hit me right away. It was many, many years up until I finally left the band when I decided, you know what, I might want to try this. This might be a better fit for me. I don't know if I answered that question.
You answered a lot of questions I had kind of in one, and one of them was going to be about the difference between songwriting for a band, kind of a 4-minute pop song or type of formula versus a song for a scene, for what's the process like for, so, you have something in your mind, like where you want to bring a scene to life and you want to bring it to life with a song, and you touched on a little bit about the prompt and the differences, but it sounds like that was what was kind of calling you, that difference in songwriting style.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was always writing that way, and all the music that I wrote kind of had this sort of story element, almost kind of creating like a scene. Country music a lot does that a lot, and I spent a little time in Nashville, and I noticed that. So, but I didn't have that like connection with that style of music, as much. But I knew that there was something there, and that's in the lyrics, and that's something that I think that with pop music, you have and I'm kind of talking out of just through a lot of different influences and people who try to like break it down. But in pop music, you have just these, 3.5 minutes, of time to just get what you want out there, and whatever that might be, and you have that feeling, you have an idea, like that small morsel of an idea, and you put it out there, and it's open to a lot of interpretation, and you want to get that hook, and you want to repeat that hook or in the chorus or something, and find ways to, light it from, with your different verses, it's, but you have that moment, and there's also, you're going to hear that song many, many times on the radio, or if you buy the album and everything. And that's, kind of, where when you have a pop song, it's, or not, when I say pop, shouldn't
Sure.
just boil it down to that category, but any style of music that's
Right.
not in like dramatized, like in musical theater. So in a musical, what usually is, the case, unless you go out and buy the cast album, you're hearing that song for the very first time within the context of a story that you're seeing, and you're not going to hear it again. It's not, unless you hear like maybe just themes or, motifs throughout the show, or reprises. But aside from that, you're not like just, hearing that song, and you won't hear it on the radio or anything. That song fits a moment, in a show. It's dramatized. And the other thing is that you have that time, that song, when you're doing a music, that brings in so much more emotion and character and feeling. So you want to, show like a change, like within, like maybe at the beginning of a song, you'll, if you listen to a lot of different musicals, like, like those main songs, like that third or fourth song that comes in, what we call like the I Wish song. You have your proposed, you're faced with like kind of like something that's happened, and you have to make a choice. And then in the song, you'll see like this sort of dynamic change from the beginning to the end, where by the end, there's a moment of, okay, now it pushes the story along. Whereas in a pop song, it's like, I would say like, the change is there. You know what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Now you need to express it. So from the beginning to the end, you're just trying to get that out there in a very broader way. And again, there's of course exceptions to everything. I'm not saying that's exactly what it is, but that's the one thing you'll notice, why it feels like, why aren't we hearing just, musical theater songs just playing on the radio all the time? Where it's like, there's something more, you don't usually repeat, lyrics and chorus to chorus. There's not a lot of that, because you are more in the moment. You're trying to convey a lot of information, whereas in more, commercial music, you're trying to convey more of that feeling.
Right. Yeah, that's great. No, that was really interesting to listen to, and just as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about my own songwriting process and songs and people I've worked with, and it's just what's so great to me about music in general is the different ways that it can be expressed. And when I watch musicals, and my wife's a huge fan of them, so watch them from time to time, and she's got me up to date on the ones I need to watch and all that. And it is really interesting in the difference of the songwriting, how it just brings to life a scene, and really moves the story along, and is a big integral part of the story. And so when you're talking, what's it like? So and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you're someone that's in charge of the music for the scene, and you've written the lyrics, and you know kind of what the scene should look like from a sense, but then are you also working with, say, a producer or a director for the actors, like hand in hand? You guys work together to bring it all together, or who's in charge of that scene, I guess, with the music?
Oh, well, definitely. I mean, with musical theater, the one thing that is very collaborative. I mean, it's collaborative also when you work with, in commercial music, but when you're dealing with a musical where it's staged, it's more than just the writer, like the composer, the lyricist, and like the book writer. But then you have directors, and you have choreographers, you have producers, you have the actors themselves. You have so many pieces, because you're also putting on a performance, and everything you do affects, everything. And to answer the question, it's, it all really just depends on, the team and the show. when you're at the beginning stages where you're just writing the show, like if you have a team, like for instance, if you're like a book writer, you have one person's a book writer, one's like the music and lyricist, or you have maybe three, one does lyrics, one does music, one does book. You make those, you kind of set up, okay, who's in charge of what. The book writer will have the final say on, what the story will be or what the dialogue will be. And the lyricist will have the final say on the lyrics and composer with the music, but they all sort of work together. So if like the lyricist and the composer are working, hand in hand, the composer may come up with some music and the lyricist will, this isn't really fitting. Can we add like another bar? And then he will, or she will. And that sort of thing. So there's a lot of that together. And then once it gets into the moment of production, then producers will have something to say about it. Or if like you bring in like a star and then we need to change the key for this, or you need to give them an extra song. Yeah, there's, it's almost kind of like making a movie, in that same way. In more recent times, there's a lot of movies that are now musicals, and so there's a lot of different people that have a lot to say, but you just have to, like, even when in a traditional commercial, like songwriting team, you set who's in charge of what, but you all collaborate together. So it's very similar in that style. It always does come down to, just as long, who's open collaboration, but everyone has like a job, like who oversees what. And as long as the vision is met.
Sounds like it could be a really fun experience where you're working with people, and I'm sure at times things happen or change through in the process that you didn't see coming. And has that ever happened with you recently?
Oh yes. All the time. Well, I mean, in good ways as well. I mean, It's not always just like, oh, I can't believe this happened. Like we're now considering, with the show that we're working on right now, we're trying to move like, scenes around in order to accommodate like, certain aspects of, how the costume changes have to be made and the blocking. And I'm like, oh man, no, that changes the flow of the whole middle part of the show entirely. And we're having all these like, like thoughts and ideas of trying to figure it out. But now what direction we're going, I'm like, I never really considered that, but that could also work and in a new way, and the other thing that's kind of interesting, I should point out, the big difference I had to learn about musical theater is that it's a very fluid, dynamic, and ever changing process. With a songwriting background, you write a song and at some point you just have to stop writing it and just release it out into the world. This is a great quote. Somebody had told me is songs aren't, or art is never finished, only abandoned. Or something. Like that.
Right.
And it's like, it made me think about that. I was like, well, because at some point it has to get out there. And that was also a problem I had as a starting songwriter. I could never get things out because I never felt like it was perfect. But in musical theater, even if you feel like it's perfect, once it goes through the whole like workshopping process and you go through all the different stages of trying to develop the show, that song may not only just change and be rewritten, it may just be cut entirely and just tossed out. The best song you wrote, Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote Hamilton and starred in Hamilton, and originally when he wrote In the Heights, said there was only one song from his original version of In the Heights that still exists in the current version of it, and it's like played in the background, like on the radio, like the background track or something, a little bit of that. Otherwise it was almost entirely rewritten, and that's the process of musical theater. Which kind of scared me to death because I'm from a just songwriting background. Could you imagine, like, you have the song that you wrote and then like 2 years later someone's saying, okay, you got to rewrite this second verse and you have to add two more bridges, and you're like, what? That's perfect. Why do we have to? Oh yeah, you're right. Because now we took this scene out and then we had to move this over, and so much has changed. And that's an interesting thing. And even from a show that's before Broadway, on its way to Broadway, and then even after Broadway when it goes on tour, you'll notice if people who are listening to musical theater, there are like songs that aren't the same as they saw and Broadway, that then when they saw it on tour and things have changed, because it's still changing.
Interesting.
There was I think even the Fantastics for 40 years, they added a song or something after like 40 years of being on Broadway or something. I might be wrong. You can fact check me on that, but yeah.
That's great. And so let's talk about what you're doing right now. And so I know you're getting ready to head out to New York here in a week or so, and you've got Alien vs. Musical, your off-Broadway debut in New York, January 14th, 18th, and 20th. And boy, just kind of going through, what's been said about it. You guys have gotten a lot of positive reviews, and I'm sure this is an exciting time for you and the staff that's been working on it.
Oh yes, yeah. No, we're very very lucky to have such great people. This was co-written by one of my best and closest friends, Steve Troop, who actually came up with the idea for the show and kind of almost had to talk me into it many times. I shouldn't say almost, definitely had to talk me into it. But and then over the years, when we opened at the Hollywood Fringe back in 2015, this amazing cast and director and stage manager and a music director and all these people who had come together helped us develop the show. And then we brought it back and the year after, expanding it, try to find a way to make it like an off-Broadway show. And then it was just another 2 years of me just kind of learning to be a producer and then finally getting this opportunity to get this little off-Broadway run. And we have an amazing director that's out there in New York. His name's Tyler Spicer, and our music director Brian Blasky, he's out there, and a great new cast and team at this festival. It's the New York Winter Fest, as they call it. And Steve who also co-wrote the show with me, designed all the creatures and costumes and the props, and all the exciting surprises that come out in the show. And he's rebuilding a lot of new things for it. So we're very excited about the process and how we got here. And it was a lot of people who contributed to help this happen.
And congratulations. And that's, that's got to be such a fun time going out there. And spend some time in New York. So how long will you be there in New York for the show?
Well, the show is part of the festival that we're debuting this out in New York is just for it's 3 shows, so it's over a week. So we'll be there for about 2 weeks. Okay. Catch a little bit of the final rehearsals. But the hope will be that we will be able to roll this into either a permanent venue somewhere in New York or possibly touring it. So
wow.
And this is open. This is the kind of the foot in the door, that we're hoping will open.
So, and that leads into my next question about 2019. So you're going out early January through January a little bit for Alien vs. Musical. And then what are some next things you're hoping to accomplish next year?
I'm developing a new musical. I'm brought in a really close friend of mine. Her name's Mara Hittner, who's also an incredible musician and has 2 bands that play around here in Southern California. And she and I are put together a story based on the Robin Hood legend, but taken from Marion's point of view. So the working title that we have is Marion, and the premise being that what if history has gotten it wrong? What if it was actually Marion who did everything that we think Robin Hood did? And that's
fun.
Kind of the beginning. Tonally, I've been pitching it as Wicked meets Batman. The idea of it, the story, the idea, of course, being Marion doing all these things, but everyone is mistaken this other guy named Robin, thinking he does it, and how they have to work together to save England. But from the producer side of things, though, my concept of how I view the show, I want it to be kind of almost like a live, action adventure, like an action movie or but on stage. So having a lot of yeah, like fight choreography, a lot of like fight scenes, cool arrow effects and things like that that you would see, and almost Cirque du Soleil-ish. I mean, there's a lot to be said about production value, which doesn't, you know, make a show or make or break a show. Like the script and the story and the music is, of course, the heart of the
Right.
show, but then taking that next element, giving people something visual, because musical theater is a very visual medium as well. So finding that sort of balance and that tone. So very excited about, kind of the ideas that we have about it. And we're hoping to be workshopping that early part of 2019.
Holly Lissel once said, "Voice is born from a lot of words and a lot of work. But not just any words or any work will do. You have to bleed a little. You have to shiver a little. You have to love a lot." And Shirley Kawa Jump also said, "When you find your authentic voice, it's like stepping into a comfortable pair of shoes." As a writer, finding what you feel is your authentic voice within any art form is a never-ending and at times painstaking process. You beg, steal, and borrow from the greats. You test drive ideas outside your comfort zone, and you check to see if it might be hiding at the bottom of a nice glass of bourbon. It's so refreshing to meet and find people who have found it and do express that voice in whatever industry or field that is. Erik laid out the long and winding path it took for him to find his authentic voice in writing and composing songs and stories for musical theater after years of playing music in various other forms. Later in this portion of the interview, Erik discusses the importance of constantly finding ways to release material that is near and dear to yourself, no matter how big or small the audience or how good or bad reviews may be, but that the beauty is in the doing and the creating. The author Robin Lefevers once wrote, "Finding our voice is about having the strength and courage to proclaim what we have to say matters, that what we feel is relevant, that what fascinates us is worthy of fascination." You mentioned at the top of the show, we were talking about family and Christmas and kids, and I know you have a little one now. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
just turned 3.
Okay, congratulations. And
Thank you.
how has becoming a father and having a little one changed, or has it changed your career or your view on it?
It's I think 2 ways. One, it's obvious. It's made me have to completely change the way I think about scheduling and time management in a way I've never had to think of before. I mean, as a working musician, and for those who are, musicians and out there, that time management, that's, you do that all the time. Yeah. And now throw a baby into it who's growing and just when you figured out that time management, then, he doesn't take, as many naps, and, now he has daycare, and, now he's not napping anymore. And yeah, so it's constantly evolving. So time management has been, the big part. So I've had to schedule the way I write, and do my work around that time. So it's like almost having a 9 to 5, like, okay, once he's gone, I have, 6 to 4 hours here, 6 hours here, 8 hours here, and that's it. And once that's done, then I'm done. Where I used to have a lot more freedom to write. I could be up to 3 a.m. working on something. Yeah, those days are gone. And so that's challenging, and it definitely changes the pace of how I've been, writing and producing. But the other interesting thing that's happened is it's kind of given me something more to shoot for. I don't know how to say this. Like, I don't want to say like inspired, but like I kind of want. I have this feeling, and whether he cares or not as he gets older, to kind of show him like, I'm doing this not just for me, but I want to show him by example to go for things that you want to do and that you love to do, that you're passionate about, and not give up and keep at it. And so he's motivating me to try to, to work harder, to be the best me I can be, along with my wife, of course, who's always been doing it and was integral in me finally getting out of my 5-6 jobs of different types of music and trying to write musicals and all my jobs and trying to focus in on this, which is what led me to leave the band originally and everything. So between, my wife and then having my son and as our family's going to be growing, it does focus me in a way that I thought was not, that couldn't happen. I felt like it would be, when kids, it's distracting. Oh, they're going to take all your time and you're not going to be able to do anything. But no, I mean, you just got to look, if you look at it from the other side, I'm like, well, that's, they're the ones that, you're doing this for, as well as for yourself, for everybody. And that it really, it was interesting how it's really kind of helped me. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's such a great answer. And I've heard others talk about that, how it adds like because creating and writing music and kind of pursuing your passions, like you said in the beginning, is about yourself and about survival and, doing the best work you can and making, trying to find the next job, the next gig. And then, like you said, now you have a family and a little one, and it adds another dimension to it that I'm sure is at times, like you said, difficult with the time management and changes things. But your story makes me think of someone else we had on the podcast, Daniel Wallace, who wrote Big Fish, the book. And then,
I listened to that one.
Daniel was great. And he talked about how he wrote Big Fish in between, when his son was taking naps, and that was his time where he could go and write. And that's kind of the reason that the book had such short chapters, or some were a little bit longer, some were really short, because basically he was writing during the nap time and he had to change his style and his process. And so just reminded me when you were talking about that with your son and how it's changed a little bit. Kind of going off from this, you've worked over the last 20 years with people in bands, producers, composers, people of all different styles and levels. Who are some standout people that are really great at their jobs and whatever it happens to be that you've kind of noticed through your years of working?
Let's see, that's a really good question. Musically, I have a lot of, influences, from, all the piano singer-songwriters, obviously like Billy Joel and Elton John. And then I expanded up, like back in the 90s, I got really into Ben Folds. Love that guy, and he's still doing some great stuff. And then through some of my friends, I started getting more involved in like different other singer-songwriters. Jonathan Brooke, I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's really wonderful. And
not as much her, but check her out.
Yeah, she had a group called The Story early on, and then she went solo, and really amazing stuff if you hear her. And then, I loved that style and that feel, and I kept pursuing people that, really inspired me that way. And then when I got into musical theater, I just was listening to a lot of, soundtracks to help me with the shows I was working on. Like that, my first one, I was listening to a lot of Wicked and Les Miserables and Saigon and all these other different shows. So I started getting more involved, but it wasn't until I listened to this one guy. His name is Jason Robert Brown. If you're not familiar with him, get familiar with him. He's
Okay.
incredible. Um, he I went to a this musical theater conference, like a workshop. He's written some shows called one's called Parade, which is fantastic, and Songs from a New World, which is like a song cycle. More recently, he wrote like Bridges Madison County, Honeymoon in Vegas. Um, but he has this great show called The Last 5 Years, which is like two people, just a man and a woman, and it tells their story from of their relationship over 5 years. One from the man's point of view, from the beginning to the end, and from the woman's point of view, from the end to the beginning. Excuse me. And it isn't until the middle of the show where they actually meet and share the stage. They actually made a movie of it pretty recently with Anna Kendrick and Jeremy Jordan.
Okay.
But anyway, so I saw him and he performed, and which is a great show. But he was performing this song from this new show he was writing called 13, with 13-year-olds. Is the concept, and the band would be made of 13-year-olds, and this is really great concept. And he played the song, and it just opened me up. It made me realize this song. It was called like When You're a Nerd. I didn't know musical theater could be like this. I didn't know I had the freedom to be able to write from the heart, like my style, like this way of doing it. And it felt like when you write musical theater, you have to really stay within a very traditional box of, styles and everything. And this felt so open. And I just ingested everything he did after that. And I had a chance of meeting him a few times. That was very cool. That influence probably more than anything got me to believe in myself. Like, I can do this. If I don't have to try to write, I don't feel like this pressure to have to impress people with like a certain style of music. Like, I think that was the problem I had with trying to get into the commercial music. Like there's, when I try to submit songs to producers and artists, it's like, there's just so much, like, I have to fit into this box where, in musicals, it's the same thing. You have to still sell, you still have to be good. You still have to have a craft, but I felt like so much more freedom. I could be me for the first time. And so I think that influence was really great. For me to have, and the work ethic, and he keeps working so hard, and with other people I've met, just doing it, just going out and doing what you need to do for yourself. That was a really long answer, I think, to a short question, but
no, that's a great answer. I love it. And going off of what you're kind of mentioning, so you mentioned Jason Robert Brown and some of the moments that he's created and the songs that have stuck out to you. Are there some moments or songs that you've created in any of your past or current work that you're particularly proud of, that you feel like stand out to you?
It's interesting with, as a songwriter, as it's like the stuff as you grow and the new things seem like so much better. And then like 5 years from now, you're like, oh, really? What was I, I wrote that, I'm so much better. We're our own worst critics. It's not that first we just, we're evolving. I have this little Christmas show I wrote called A Song for Christmas. It was the second show I ever wrote, and it's changed quite a bit. And they just performed it in New Jersey, at this little theater called Main Street Players in Parlin, New Jersey, just this last Christmas. And it was started off as a compilation of all these Christmas songs I wrote, but then a couple songs I wrote for the show to accommodate the story. And there are two in that one. There's one called Dreams Follow You. It's a story of, it's a letter that the grandmother writes to her grandson, who's kind of the lead of the character after, I don't want to, well, spoiler alert, she has passed away, and he's been trying to, get his whole life together and trying to pursue his whole world, but forgetting the things that are important and trying to press her. And that's like, I don't know. I just got a post someone shared on Facebook from the production, and they said, like, it was very funny. He's like, our this Dreams Follow You is playing, and our lighting board operator can't stop crying, And then he tagged me, Eric, you owe me a new light board. And I'm like, that is probably the best compliment I've gotten from a song like that, you know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I never thought, I mean, it was a song I just kind of wrote kind of quickly just to put into the show because it needed to be there. It needed to be a part to sort of cap off the journey between the grandson and the grandmother. There's a lot more I think I would have said I was more proud of, but just because of that post just recently, it's really stuck out in my mind how that was nice. It's that, wow, something is giving so much emotion to someone. So yeah.
Sure.
And then I wrote,
that's great.
Yeah. And then there's a song from a show I've been trying to develop based on Thumbelina, called Bigger Than My Dreams. And that's on my website and you can listen. And that one, although the show I've kind of shelved for now, it's been performed many times, sometimes without me knowing at different places, which of course is great. I want it to be performed, but it's nice to just hear like, oh, I went on YouTube and someone else has performed it at somewhere. And it's kind of gained a little life of its own. And I'm very proud of how that song turned out and just very flattered how much people have really kind of taken to it and used it for auditions, for their cabaret pieces and everything. So yeah, so that's the other one.
Wow, some fun stuff. And yeah, I can just imagine that's pretty nice experience to see something you've worked on come to life on stage and see it. And then like you mentioned, the song for Christmas, Dreams Follow You, something you wrote a while ago, but it's, still having an effect on people to this day, which is fun as well. It's not just your new stuff, but stuff you've written all over the place. Hey, career investments. What's one of the best investments you feel like you've made in your career?
I'll be honest. I've been listening to some of your podcasts now. You've asked everyone this. I'm like, oh wow, how am I going to answer this? This is great. By the way, I've been really enjoying your podcast. It's wonderful. Before I answer,
thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. And all your people you've interviewed, they've been just very inspiring in different ways. I guess in the way I can answer that best is I've invested in myself around between 2006 2008. I went through this sort of time where I needed to find myself, I guess. I got out of a long-term relationship and I needed to just and everything kind of changed, and I was kind of starting musical theater like as a possibility. So I just sort of invested in just like, you know what, I'm going to just focus on me for a while, and I'm going to be selfish for the first time. I feel like, and I don't mean that in a weird, it sounds weird. I feel like a lot of what I do is like just making sure that I accommodate so many people and, all the jobs I have and try to do everything. And I never really felt like I could really say like, well, what do I want? What makes me happy? What is it that, makes me want to do this? Why am I even being here, doing all these jobs, and why I can't say, and I used to never say no to anyone. And so I guess the long answer to this is I finally allowed myself to just say no to certain things, not because I was mean or I didn't want to, but I had to think of, I had to just focus on me and just be like, maybe I'm important enough. I should be, looking at myself as another person and looking at like, hey, why don't I take care of this guy for a while, And that process, was a few years of me doing that. And it really just, I don't know, I just took that time to, allow myself to take some chances and look at myself and focus, and kind of helped me find a direction that led me to where I am right now. I don't know. That's a weird answer, but
no, that's a great answer. And is it, when you kind of said no to more things, is it more like, you would not take certain jobs over others, or you just would, you hunkered in more on certain things that you really were interested in? Or how did you, I guess, in those years really invest in yourself?
That exactly, actually. There's always people who, want, hey, can you help me, put this track together, or hey, can you help me, with with this and everything. I couldn't say no. I have to help
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
Or there would be a lot of times where, can you be a part of this project? And it's the hardest thing because, obviously it's work there and a lot of it, is unpaid, but I love to do it. And I want to, it's that feeling of like, you just want to help people because you can do it. You can do a great job. You can add something to their concert or their performance or their audition or their production or whatever. But yeah, I had to say no to things and, they were like, okay. And they found someone else and everything was great from what I hear. And so it wasn't like, it was kind of weird. I felt like, oh, well, yeah, it's not that, they'll figure it out, and
Sure.
and that's okay. And they want me to be happy. No one has ever, made me feel like, oh, you abandoned us or anything. That was an interesting realization when I finally, put myself first, and it sounds weird, like a very selfish, like self-involved way, but it wasn't. It was more like it was a struggle. It was like I had to give myself permission to allow myself to, to be the person I say yes to,
Right.
because I would say no to myself, but I would have no problem saying no to things that I wanted to work on. Now I had to say yes. And and it's, now there's a balance now.
Sure.
And now I can, now I know how to do it. Now I just say no to everybody. No, sorry. No, I'm kidding. No.
That's a great answer. No, that's as you're talking, you're very inspiring. So like, it's just like, I'm thinking like, oh, I should, I need to say it. So, I appreciate that thoughtful answer. And so I know you've listened to some of the other guests from the podcast, and one of the other questions I do like to ask towards the end is about, books, or things that you've read that potentially were inspiring. And so I want to ask you about that. And then I also want to ask you on the other end for you. So some books maybe that are inspiring, but then as well as that, for those that are maybe new or not, always in on the newest, musical theater stuff, what are some like, hey, you got to see this musical if you only see one or two or three. So, some books and maybe some musical theater recommendations for us.
Well, all right. So the book thing, I'm probably one of the only writers out there who's like the worst reader. I'm trying to remember. I was like, oh man, I know who's going to ask this. I'm like, what is the last book that I read? And the last book I did read was about how, tips on how to raise money, how to do fundraising for your for shows and for producing. I actually do a lot of online reading. What it's interesting is like although I don't immerse myself in as many books as I should, I do a lot of research, and with the internet, it's changed the game so much, in so many ways. But there's so much information out there that, when I'm unsure of something or if I want to really get into, and that means like, as I'm working on the Marion musical, I know so much more about, the history of Robin Hood. And there's no novel or book that comes from. That's a list of songs that were written and little poems, and how, how the whole story was derived from these, this collection of like, minstrel, works. And that's, so I do a lot of research. I really dig deep, starting maybe with Wikipedia, but you really find there's a lot of people out there with articles and a lot of writers, and novelists who really publish a lot of things. So I'm a big advocate of researching. So, so that's that. The book that I do have on my shelf right now, which I'm just slowly getting into, is another possible idea. I'm very interested in the concept of Nikola Tesla and his life, and of course with the cars and with everything, and with this sort of musical, like autobiographical like kind of trend that's happening. I'm like, this, it's an idea I've actually had for about 3 or 4 years now. So I have all these concepts, but so now I'm doing a lot more research, and I've started with documentaries. I'm a big movie watcher, so
Okay.
and documentaries, so I have a lot of those. So there's the Tesla autobiography is there, and then there was, I've been reading some. I did some plays with a musical theater workshop I was with. So Proof was really great, and in the Tropics, Rabbit Hole. These were some that were assigned to us, and we musicalized. So it was interesting. I read some of those plays. Yeah, so that's basically it book wise. I definitely am big advocate of research. So, and there's so much out there. So I when people who are interested in learning about, musical theater or and that sort of thing, yeah, just go online. There's, or hit me up. I can definitely refer some more specific things. And so musicals, right? Is that the other?
Yeah. So
so funny too. Also, it's interesting because I mean, I was a songwriter. I was in a band. I don't have the type of background that most people, my contemporaries of musical theater writers that are out there who grew up with this, and they kind of knew from the beginning on. I'm kind of getting in this a little late in the game, but I've just been devouring, all these different shows, trying to catch up. And I would say if you are interested in seeing anything that's out right now, shows that I've seen, I just saw Dear Evan Hansen.
Okay.
And that if you can catch that, it's very cool. Pasek and Paul, that's the writing team who came behind this. They also just did Greatest Showman, and they were the lyricists in La La Land. Those guys are fantastic. Wow. Anything that they've written, they did the Christmas Story musical that was just on Fox as well. On TV. But Dear Evan Hansen, watch that. That's, I believe, is going to be the new wave, like the new direction of musical theater.
Oh, okay.
You have to see it. It's not just that it's very contemporary and pop, but there's a lot of, the story is really strong, and it's very engaging to a more contemporary audience. Or I think a lot of people who shy away from musical theater, they get into they think more like Oklahoma and Hello Dolly, and they think, Music Man, which you should see Music Man, which is my personal favorite musical of all time.
Okay.
Still, and probably ever will be. You should still see those, but know that was at the time back then, they wrote shows differently for a different audience. And now as time goes on, over time, musicals kind of, it's still a business. They're still trying to sell tickets. They're trying to engage the audience. So I would suggest, from listening to things from different eras, if you're listening to something contemporary watching something contemporary, Dear Evan Hansen's great. Book of Mormon, if you can get around all the explicitness of it,
right?
Whatever, it's an incredibly well-written show. Top to bottom, you have to see that show. Anything by Jason Robert Brown, see his work. The last 5 years, it's very small and intimate, but check that show out. I love it so much. Those are some good ones. Yeah,
that's a great list. Jeez, I'm taking notes, and I've got a lot to watch.
I'm a big fan of Robert Lopez and his wife, and they just they wrote Frozen, the music for that, and the new Frozen musical. I haven't seen it out there, but also follow Avenue Q was fantastic. Again, with the raunchy humor, but again, just so well written. It'll make you change your minds about musical theater, make you open up to new things. The shows I have yet to see, but I know the soundtracks well, like Come From Away, which is about the 9/11, about all the planes that were diverted to this little town out in Newfoundland.
Wow.
I think I got that right. That's on The Band's Visit. That's another one that's just came out, won a ton of awards. Yeah, see that. Fun Home. See that one. There's a lot of really cool contemporary shows that are out there. It's, musical theater it's different, and not, just to say different, but I mean, it's evolving. It's evolved to, for the audiences out here who are craving really good stories, great music, and all the people, all the minds, the creative teams and the writers behind all the new shows that are out now. they're just fantastic, and they could have, it's all the new. These are all going to be classics. So yeah, so definitely, I would suggest everyone just go and see new theaters as much as you can. See what's out there. It's definitely, you'll be pleasantly surprised if you don't know what to expect, and just know, yeah, it's so good.
I can't wait to. Well, I'll list all of those in the show notes for this podcast. I'll list all those shows because I'm trying to write them down myself, but I've got a lot of. I'm excited about it. Stuff to watch. So before we close, where can people find you and follow you online? Where should they go?
Yeah, well, if you can spell my name, Erik Przytulski, yeah, if you do a search for me, yeah, you can find me that way. I have a website, Pretzel Music, and Pretzel spelled Pretzl music. Okay. A little play because of my last name having so many Z's and Y's in it. So Pretzel was always our nickname on my dad's side, all of my cousins and all of us growing up. So pretzelmusic.com, Pretzel Music. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And alienversusmusical.com. That's the show that's going to be out in New York right now. And there's links to tickets, or if you want to donate to future productions. And there's a little video with a little sizzle reel and some information on there as well. My website has some of my music on there as well.
Okay. And yeah, Erik, this has been great. I've loved hearing about your path and all that you've done and where you're going. And this has been just a really fun interview. So thank you so much for coming on. And
thank you.
Thank you. I really did. And I'm going to leave you with the last word before we close. So anything else you'd like to add before we leave the show?
I think the little mantra that I've been using a lot recently and kind of has directed my life finally in a more positive way is when people ask about whether or not what they should do or not, if they get apprehensive about making the leap into writing a song or writing a show or doing anything creative, creating any type of art. I say, look, you can't control if people like it. You can only, or if it's good, you can only control if it exists. So yeah,
that's great.
If you don't put it out there, you won't. Yeah. Even if one person in the world loves what you did, I think that's enough, It doesn't have to be the biggest hit. It doesn't have, they're in Broadway, especially, only 1 in 5 shows ever make their money back, and of those shows, there's, and there's amazing shows that just didn't, make it, and that for one reason or other financially. And it's not because they weren't good or bad. That's, like movies, it's the same thing, there's probably some cult classics out there that people put out there and they just love, even if it wasn't this big blockbuster, or even if it didn't if it's not, Hamilton, it's like, even though Hamilton is an incredibly amazing show. But you can't control that. You can't control whether people, think it's good or not. You can only control if it exists, if you put it out there and let people decide for themselves, because there is an audience for everybody and for everything. And it might just change someone's life, and you don't know that, and you may never know that, but, put it out there and take a chance. And that was the beginning of me finally, just really would sort of just change my life. And that just started me finding success, was by just allowing myself that, hey, just get it out there. Whatever happens, happens.
What a great episode. Thanks so much to Erik Przytulski for coming on and for sharing his story and all his insights on writing and all that he does. We're really excited for him and Alien Verse Musical. His production is coming out January 14th, 18th, and 20th in New York City off Broadway. You can find out more alienversemusical.com and find out about Erik at pretzelmusic.com. Pretzl music.com. I want to thank Jack Carlino for the artwork for this production. Follow him at Jack Captures Light on Instagram. The song you're hearing behind us right now is called Lila. That will be on the new record Grandeur, coming out January 18th. And the song for the interlude is called Words, also on the new record. Thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, keep making that beautiful work.